Hey everybody, welcome to the channel, True Crime Stories. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like button and subscribe so you can hear more. Thanks for stopping by. I started recording this video on Father's Day, and I didn't get a chance to post it at that time because of busy schedule and things going on, but today's Father's Day, June 21st, 2026. I just wanted to say Happy Father's Day to any of my listeners out there who maybe are fathers. I just want to say Happy Father's Day. And on that note, we've been seeing a lot of stuff in the news on TV recently about fathers. I'm sure most of you have seen this video, this viral video going around of this young man who took his two little girls into the women's bathroom on a road trip. They were traveling from Florida back home to Oklahoma, and as most of us have done on these types of trips, we stop at gas stations to go use the bathroom, pick up a few drinks or something on the way. He did the same thing. He was traveling, took them into the ladies' room, and this other man comes along. I'm thinking this other man's wife and mother-in-law went to use the bathroom and found this man in there and became upset about that. Not really even taking the time, I think, to realize that he was just a dad trying to get his daughters, back cleaned up and back to the car and back on the road. And, of course, there's the Austin Metcalf's dad, Carmelo Anthony's dad, these differences, this back and forth, people who are taking one side or the other side. And so today I wanted to talk about a dad. I want to talk today about this man, Robert Eugene Brashers. Robert Eugene Brashers was born March 13th, 1958. He died January 19th, 1999. Now, during his lifetime, Brashers was convicted of attempted murder when he shot a woman in 1985, and for another offense stemming from a 1992 case in which he stole a vehicle. But it wasn't until after his death. Now, it says that he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in 1999 to avoid being arrested for an unrelated crime after standoff with the police. Now, it wasn't until after his death, a good decade or two later, that the true story of who this man was started to come out. Decades after his death, due to advances in investigative genetic genealogy, Brashers was tied to a series of extremely violent crimes. His DNA was linked to several unsolved rapes and murders committed against women and young girls. In 2025, police in Austin, Texas, identified Brashers as the perpetrator in the 1991 Austin yogurt shop murders. Now, anybody who follows true crime stories, anybody who watches the ID channel or any of these networks that show this type of content know about the yogurt shop murders. Now, he committed, it's thought, just from what they've been able to determine as of today, that he had committed at least 8 murders in Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina, and Texas between 1990 and 1998. Now, it's possible that at some point he will be found to have committed more murders or rapes. His daughter had done a story. I read a story earlier about her and how she talked about how shocking it was when they found out these things. She says that some of her best memories are when she lived with her father in Arkansas for 2 years of her life. Along with her mother and her half-twin sisters, she said that her father would take them on camping trips. He would take them canoeing and swimming, and that they would have bonfires, and that they did family things together, and that he was a good dad. She said that he would buy all of the girls roses on Valentine's Day. Now, Robert Eugene Brashers grew up. He was born in Newport News, Virginia. He was the youngest of 4 children. When he was young, his family moved to Huntsville, Alabama, and this is where he spent most of his childhood. It's said that he committed no offenses as a teenager and was never known to have been into any trouble. He wasn't known to be someone who used drugs or, just he was a good kid in school. He was never talked about having behavioral problems or anything like that. Now, after he graduated from high school, he enlisted in the Army. Now, this is when problems started to arise. It could be that he was doing stuff in high school that just wasn't being noticed, or maybe it was kind of being swept under the rug. But it was when he was in the military that he started to show behavioral problems. Now, it says that he served for about a year, about 10 months in the military before he was discharged due to personality disorders. In the early 80s, Brashers moved to Louisiana. He settled down in the New Orleans area, but by the mid-80s, he moved once again to Fort Myers, Florida. And this is when his first daughter was born in 1991. Now, on November the 22nd, 1985, Brashers was arrested in Port St. Lucie, Florida, on charges of assaulting a 24-year-old woman named Michelle Wilkerson. According to investigators, he met her in Fort Pierce, and he convinced her to go with him to a bar. They spent the evening there, and after they had spent the evening there at this bar drinking, he walked her to a nearby dark alley, and they drank some beer together, and he attempted to have sex with her. She refused, and she tried to leave. They had gotten into his vehicle. They were in his vehicle at this point. He was trying to get her to have sex with him. She said no. She wanted to get out of the car. But they got into a fight. And he shot her twice in the head and the neck. Now, despite the severity of this injuries, Wilkerson stayed awake. She remained conscious. She managed to get out of the car and hide. Now, he looked for her, but he could not find her. So he went to the beach and he threw his gun into the ocean. He then attempted to leave, but his truck got stuck in the sand. So he started walking down the street searching for help. He was trying to find someone who would come and help him pull his truck out of the sand. In the meantime, Michelle Wilkerson takes the opportunity to run. Now that he's left, She runs and she makes it to a nearby apartment building. She gets someone's help, and they help her to get medical attention. And she's taken to a nearby hospital. She described the man to the police, and she described his car. A few minutes later, Brashers was apprehended while wandering around the beach, and he was charged with attempted first-degree murder, aggravated battery, and using a firearm in a crime. He was convicted the next year, and he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. But because this was his first charge, and the laws were a little bit more lenient, he was released from prison for good conduct on May 4th, 1989. So he served basically 3 years in jail for this crime. After his release, he moved to South Carolina. So he moved between the states of South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. Now, C.C. Moore from Parabon Nanolabs, who we've all heard of if you are someone who follows this type of content, once again, you know who C.C. Moore is. She is a genetic genealogist. She was able to use DNA to identify Brashers as a suspect in 3 murders and several rapes dating back to 1990. Prosecutors in New Madrid County and Pemiscot County, Missouri, filed a motion to exhume his remains. Remains were exhumed, and he had been buried in Arkansas. DNA was extracted from his remains, and DNA testing revealed that his genetic profile was a perfect match. Genevieve Jenny Satricki. She had been bludgeoned, raped, and strangled with her pantyhose in her apartment in Greenville, South Carolina on April 5th, 1990. At the time, it was established that after he murdered her in the bedroom, the killer then dragged her body into the bathtub, and then on her bathroom mirror, he wrote, "Don't F UCK with my family," on the bathroom mirror. A DNA sample belonging to the perpetrator was isolated in 1995 and was then uploaded to CODIS. Investigators were able to establish that at the time of her murder, Brashers was living in Greenville, South Carolina, not too far away from this woman's home. Now we're going to jump ahead to the Austin yogurt shop murders in 1991. On the night of December 6, 1991, 4 teenage girls, 2 of whom were employees at the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop in Austin, Texas, and 2 other girls who were there as friends of theirs. They were tied up and murdered, and then the store was set on fire in an attempt to cover this crime up. 3 of the victims, at least 3 of the victims, possibly all of the victims, had been raped. On December the 26th, 2025, the Austin Police Department announced that it had identified Brashers as the perpetrator of those rapes. A DNA profile was developed from swabs of rape kits on these bodies of these 3 young victims, and the profile did not match any of the previous suspects. Further DNA testing revealed Brashers matched a profile found under the fingernails of the youngest victim. Testing on a bullet casing found in the drain at the crime scene was consistent with patterns produced by Brashers' gun. Now, this was the same gun that he had used in this police standoff in 1999, and the same gun that he had used to self-inflict his own demise. In December 2025, the Travis County District Attorney's Office filed a motion to exonerate 4 men who had previously been accused of committing the murders. The yogurt shop murders. Now, only 2 days after this yogurt shop murders took place, Brashers was stopped at the border by Border Patrol at a checkpoint. He was traveling westbound on Interstate 10 between El Paso, Texas, and Las Cruces, New Mexico. During the checkpoint stop, it was discovered that he was driving a truck that had been reported stolen in Marietta, Georgia. While searching the stolen vehicle, Border Patrol agents found a .380 gun, a .380. This was the same make and model of the gun that had been used in the yogurt shop murders. After the discovery of this weapon, Brashers fled in the vehicle for about a mile before he was stopped by law enforcement and he surrendered. He was charged with auto theft and as a felon in possession of a firearm. The gun was then released to his father after sentencing and was later used in the murder of Linda Rutledge in 1998. But these Border Patrol agents pulled him over and stopped him, didn't put it together, didn't wonder why this man is fleeing in a stolen truck with this weapon that was the same type of weapon used in these yogurt shop murders. Maybe they had already zeroed in on people that they thought had done this crime, so they were not going to be looking at anybody else. On February 18, 1992, he was arrested in Cobb County, Georgia for grand theft auto, unlawful possession of a weapon, and theft. While searching his vehicle and his apartment, police found a police scanner radio, a police jacket, lock-picking tools, and a fake Tennessee driver's license. Now, because he was looking at going back to prison, he made a plea deal with the prosecutors, and he pled guilty to the most serious of the charges. The rest of the charges against him were dropped. So, I'm assuming, looking back on it now, and I'm sure others who've investigated this, said, what was he doing with this police jacket? He was trying to pass himself off as a police officer. Or maybe he was using it to leave the scene of these crimes in this area so that he wouldn't be seen as a suspect. Now, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for this charge, and he did serve that full prison sentence. And once he was released in 1997, he moved to Arkansas. Now, in 1997, in March 1997, he raped a 14-year-old girl in Memphis, Tennessee. In that case, the victim and 4 other people were inside of the home. He knocked on the door, forced his way into the residence with a revolver, and he tied up all of the occupants. And then he raped this 14-year-old girl. DNA would later also link him to the double murder of 38-year-old Sherry Scherer and her 12-year-old daughter Megan, both of whom were found shot to death in their home in Missouri. This was in March of 1998. Both victims had been tied up, and Megan, 12-year-old little girl Megan, had been raped before he shot and killed her and her mother. Approximately 2 hours later, he broke into another home in Dyersburg, Tennessee, and he attempted to assault a 25-year-old woman. Now, this woman fought him fiercely. She really put up a fight against him. And he finally gave up and fled the scene. Forensics later said that the same gun had been used in this attack as the death of the other two, the 12-year-old girl and her mother. Before I move on into the next part of this story, I would just like to remind everybody, if you haven't already, to please like the video and subscribe to the channel. On April 12, 1998, Brashers was arrested while attempting to break into the home of a woman in Arkansas. Now, he had worked for this woman, so he knew her. And he had worked for her at one point. He cut the phone lines to her home, and he was armed. A video camera and locksmithing tools were seized from him. He was taken into custody, but he was later released on bail. On August 16, 1998, he was arrested and charged while he was out on bail for this other crime. He was arrested and charged with residential burglary, leaving the scene of an accident, public intoxication, and criminal impersonation in Arkansas. These charges stemmed from he was stopped. He was driving erratically when he crashed his van through a fence. He hit a parked vehicle and he fled the scene. Now, Brashers was located in the area by police officers after a witness gave information to the police, and he provided police with a false identity. The following October, Arkansas authorities issued a warrant for his arrest. 2 additional arrest warrants were issued in November for failure to appear. On November 7, 1998, at around 7:40 a.m., Lexington Fire Department in Lexington, Kentucky, was dispatched to the Nixon Hearing Aid Center for a fire. When crews arrived at the scene, they observed heavy smoke coming from the business. Once they put this out and they got inside the structure, they found a female victim located in the hallway. She was identified as 43-year-old Linda Marie Rutledge. Her cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds to the head. Now, in September 2025, Brashers was announced to have been the perpetrator of this murder. This woman was raped and murdered. In July of 2025, detectives at Austin, Texas Police Department got a match from ballistic testing on this .380 shell casing that was recovered from the Hearing Aid Center in Lexington, Kentucky. And it was an exact match for the .380 shell casing that was located in the yogurt shop murders. So this is how they were able to determine that this man had committed both these crimes. That and DNA, of course, but DNA and these ballistics from these shell casings says that this Robert Eugene Brashers committed these crimes. But of course, he was long dead by then. Now, his 27-year-old daughter Deborah was interviewed by reporters in 2019. She said that she first met her father in 1997 after he had been released from prison. According to her, he lived with her in Arkansas for 2 years. She said that he was sometimes aggressive, but he was a good dad. And that they had good times together. And they just didn't think that he was the man that they found out later that he was. She said that his mental health declined sharply in 1998. Now, his daughter Deborah said that he took a construction job and he would be gone from the house for weeks at a time. And that she believed that her mother knew about his activities, that she knew about his, either she knew about his activities or she suspected, but she did know about his criminal history. She said that during this time that he was with them, he got into a fight with her stepfather and caused him a head injury using a drill. He made a tape recording of himself making small cuts on his neck and arm with a saw to see if he could withstand the pain. She said that her mother would tell the family to call him by a different name and not to let him outside of the house. She said that his mental health declined sharply during this time, and she believes that her mother knew stuff about him and was afraid that people in the community and people around would find out who he was. And so what ultimately led to his demise was on January 13th, 1999, police officers noticed that a stolen vehicle was parked at a Super 8 hotel in Missouri. After speaking with motel personnel, it was established that Brashers and his family had arrived in that vehicle just days earlier. Officers went, tried to open the door, tried to get someone to come to the door, and eventually they broke down the door and they found him hiding under a bed with a loaded gun. When they approached him, he put the gun to his head and threatened to kill himself. The officers then retreated and called for backup. Within a few minutes, the motel was surrounded by police cars, and Brashers took his wife, daughter, and 2 stepdaughters hostage. He released his family, and after 4 hours of negotiations, he shot himself in the head. He remained alive for 6 days in the hospital, but gave in to his injuries on January 19th. His death was ruled a self-inflicted death. Now, the people that he is, a list of his confirmed victims. Now, these are people that were linked later. This was after 1 or 2 of these people he was known to have tried to attack, or he did attack the 12-year-old girl and her mother, the 14-year-old girl, and several others. But now, many of his victims, it wasn't discovered until years later after his death, using DNA. And his victims include Michelle Wilkerson, age 24, Genevieve Satricki, 28, Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison. These were the girls who were at this yogurt shop. Megan Shearer, her mother Shuri, Linda Marie Rutledge, and then of course his own family members that he held hostage. And then there was the victims in this home invasion where he raped this 14-year-old girl and held her family. And in June of 2020, C.C. Moore recounted identifying some of his victims using DNA. And there are many links where you can find information about the yogurt shop murders. Now, the yogurt shop murders took place in 1991 in Austin, Texas. December 6, 1991, four teenage girls, Amy Ayers, Sarah Harbison, Jennifer Harbison, and Eliza Thomas, were gagged, shot, and their bodies burned inside of I Can't Believe It's Yogurt Shop. The men who were wrongfully convicted of this crime, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott, they confessed under intense police interrogations, but they both later recanted those confessions. Their convictions were overturned in the mid-2000s, and the charges were eventually dropped in 2009. Now, the true killer's identity was made in September of 2025, Robert Eugene Brashers. Jennifer and Eliza worked at this shop, and Sarah and her friend Amy were in the shop to get a ride home from Jennifer, her sister, when the shop closed. About an hour before closing time, a man came in to use the public bathroom in the back. He waited there and he propped a rear door open. He left the restaurant and then came back in through this open door. There was a couple inside the shop at the time, and they left just before closing. Around midnight that night, a patrolman reported seeing a fire at the shop, and first responders discovered the bodies of the girls inside. The victims had all been shot in the head, and at least 3 of the girls had been raped. Unlike the other girls, all 3 of the girls were found had been shot execution style with it says here a .22 caliber bullet. But unlike the others, Amy's body was found in a separate part of the shop. She had also been shot in the same way as the others. Investigators initially identified a group of suspects. Among them was a 16-year-old who was found with the same caliber, who was found with the same type of weapon that had been used in the killings. Now, these 4 teens were Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn. 2 of the men did confess, but they later recanted, saying that they were coerced and forced and just bullied, I guess, into giving these confessions. Now, they were both sentenced for these crimes, even though there was no evidence other than these two confessions that they both said they were coerced into giving. And Springsteen was sentenced to death, and Scott was sentenced to life imprisonment. In 2005, Springsteen, who was 17 at the time of the murders, had his sentence commuted to life in prison by Governor Rick Perry. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned both convictions in 2008. The men were freed in 2009. The prosecution intended to retry both defendants. However, forensic investigation showed that the DNA found in one of the victims was not a match to either one of these 2 men. Texas courts later determined that those who were released were not entitled to compensation because they could not prove that they didn't commit the crime. Now, one of the detectives in the interrogations, Hector Polanco, had been accused of coercing false confessions in previous cases. And other cases that had been, other people who had been convicted of crimes later were exonerated because of this cop coercing these people into giving confessions. And both of these men had spent 13 years in prison for assault, and one of these men was assaulted in prison and suffered permanent brain damage due to this, And he wasn't even guilty of anything. This police officer, this detective, had coerced him into giving a false confession, and this led to him being imprisoned where he was attacked and had brain damage. Now, in 2006, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned Springsteen's conviction based on an unfair trial. And no DNA matches were ever found to link either of these men to these crimes. And Brashers was identified in September of 2025. He had been dead at this point 26 years. His DNA and the forensics of the ballistics of the bullets, that the shell casings that were found, were linked back to a gun that he had used in previous crimes. So these two men, Springsteen and Scott, did file an appeal to be compensated for the years that they spent in prison after this. Now, before this man was identified using his DNA, the Texas courts ruled that these two men could not prove that they had not committed the crime, so they were not entitled to that compensation. Now, Texas courts say that up to $80,000 for each year that they were wrongfully imprisoned. And so these men did file to appeal that, to try to get compensated for those years that they were wrongfully imprisoned once it was announced that Brashers' DNA and that he was proven to be the person who committed this crime. And like I said, the man had been long dead. I don't know if he was ever suspected in this crime, but it took 26 years after his death, 35 years after this murder, these yogurt shop murders occurred, before they were able to solve that. As this video comes to an end, I would just like to remind everybody to please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.